Okay, good evening. My name's Bob Connors. It's 6:03 p.m. I'd like to call the February 18th meeting of the Newbury Conservation Commission to order. Mason, could you read the remote open meeting law preamble and take a roll call of the members present?
Good evening, everyone. As a preliminary matter, this is Mason Ferret, Conservation Agent of the Newbury Conservation Commission, and I call the February 18th meeting to order and permit me to confirm that all members are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mary Rimmer,
Yes.
TJ Conti, Mick Brown,
Yes.
Diane O'Brien, Woody Knight,
Yes.
Frank Wettenkamp,
Yes.
and Bob Connors.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. This open meeting of the Newbury Conservation Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Newbury Conservation Commission is convening by Zoom conference as posted on the agenda of the Conservation Commission section of the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. And anything that you may broadcast may be captured by the recording. Applicants or their representatives may be called upon to speak and or share the information to the screen if able on the fly. We're now turning to the first item on the agenda, but before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. The chair will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called.
Okay, thank you, Mason. Upcoming meeting dates, we have March 4th and March 18th coming up. Meeting minutes review, February 4th. Why don't we take a moment to take a look at those and see if there's any comments, corrections, or concerns. Okay, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes for February 4th as written.
So moved.
Thank you, Mary. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Woody. Okay, all in favor? Mary?
Yes.
Woody?
Yes.
Mick?
Aye.
Frank?
Yes.
And Bob Connors votes yes. All right, next order of business. We have a RDA for 8 Plumbush Downs. Applicants are submitting an RDA for renovating a home on Plumbush Downs. The dwelling is within 100 feet of the salt marsh, but will have no outward expansion out of the existing footprint, upward extension only. Mason, can you provide an overview and a recommendation on this RDA?
Yeah, so the property is on Plumbush Downs within that 100 foot of the salt marsh. Originally, it was upward extension only, but today the applicant had reached out wanting to expand the shed to be flush with the front of the deck, and for the deck in the back to also go the full length of the house. I believe everything is in the folder, and the applicants are here for any questions as well.
Okay, could you put the plan up? Is there a plan on this, Mason?
Yep.
And Mason, I have some materials as well, just following our conversation earlier today by email too, if that's helpful.
Yep.
Good evening, Tammy and Margaret.
Hi, Bob.
Hello.
How
Good
are
to
you?
meet everyone.
Good evening.
Hopefully everybody's staying warm. It's been a cold, cold, cold winter so far.
Okay, if you could zoom in on that, I think that would be helpful. Okay, well, Tammy or Margaret, do you want to make your presentation?
Yeah, of course. Mason, it might be easier if I share my screen, if that's okay, just for a couple minutes. I have a
Certainly.
clearer version of this. It looks like I'm getting a notification that says host disabled participant screen sharing.
I can change that. 1 second.
No worries.
Just check the waiting room too for members too, just in case.
Yep, we're good.
Okay.
And you should be able to share now.
Okay, perfect. Just give me one moment. My settings are also changing. I think Zoom did an update. Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, if you could just zoom in a little bit, that would be great.
Yes, of course.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
So on the left-hand side, you'll see we have current, and on the right-hand side, we have proposed. We also have some detailed view as to current and proposed changes in square footage. And there is a key here at the top right-hand, just for some of that really small print that might be difficult to read. So starting with the current, I don't know if you all are familiar with the property in Plumbush Downs. It's Unit 8. It's a small footprint, 648 square feet for living quarters with a back deck as well as a front deck as well, and then an existing shed on the property. So we are proposing to enclose the front deck and expand the living quarters to be 840 square feet. We'd like to extend the back deck to reach the length of the back of the house, and then extend that shed just out slightly to increase our ability for storage, for all the deck furniture for the winter months, when those months do come in. There is an existing gravel, if you will, driveway. It's loosely, I would call a driveway. It's not been well maintained over the years, so it's pretty sort of not maintained and not really a set driveway as it stands today. So we would like to propose moving that driveway to the front of the lot, and utilize the existing roadway gravel that is already there. And there is also a brick walkway that is in place that is not compliant. So we'd actually propose to remove that brick and replace with just beach grass, shrubs, or lawn, just to maintain with the rest of the property. So anything that you don't see that doesn't have a marking is grass lawn. And there is, it's a big lot with a small property. So there is a good amount of lawn that we'd like to just keep as is and maintain as such. It's a really beautiful property. So we really would like to make sure that we bring that to life and really just add to it over time with some additional shrubs. The last thing I will note is that behind the shed on the right-hand side, we are proposing propane tanks to come in with a gravel sort of just square area underneath for access purposes. So I'll pause there for any questions, comments from Bob or other members of the committee.
Okay, why don't I open this up? Thank you, Margaret, right?
Tammy, yeah,
Oh,
we should
Tammy,
so Margaret and
well,
Tammy. Sorry about that. We
okay,
skipped
well,
right
your
ahead.
labels are backwards, so okay, thank you. I'll open this up to questions from the members. Mary, I'll start with you. Questions for Tammy?
Well, this one's for Mason, actually. Do we have any photos of the
Yep.
Right.
Yep, I can share those.
Yeah, I'm familiar with this set. I drive by it every day.
Right. I think that my initial reaction is just not exactly what I was expecting for RDA. When it was originally, it's submitted as an just a going up, so the paperwork doesn't conform with the plans now, and this would be work that we would typically require a notice of intent for. So with the change in the driveway and the construction and the shed and the propane tanks and all the deck expansion would typically fall into the notice of intent category. So yeah, I'd be curious to see the plans.
Yeah, but you would be happy to share those. That's no problem at all. And I know, Mason, we had sort of gone back and forth over email today. So the shift was really around some of the changes that we had decided to make that weren't relevant to the existing foundation that we're building upon for the actual living structure. So it was a little bit of a miscommunication on our part, but we're happy to share the plans as they've been submitted for zoning, et cetera.
Hey, Mason, can you expand on the pictures? I guess that's what we.
Yeah, they're just thumbnails right
Yeah.
now.
Oh,
Right.
sorry about that.
Yeah,
If we could expand on them and just go through them all, that'd be great. And Mary will tell you to stop when she wants a closer look. Hey, you're back.
can you tell me, Tammy or Margaret, if this is on, it's on a full foundation now? Is that,
Yes, yep.
You guys see this?
no,
Yes.
just still the
Awesome.
thumbnails?
If you click on those, will they expand, Mason?
They are expanding. It's just not showing on the screen share. I'm not sure why. Here we go.
Okay, there we go. So Tammy, this is a picture of your existing deck and you're basically going to square the house off.
Yes.
Okay,
This is in the existing driveway right now. And then
just last, and this is representative of the shed you're talking about?
Yes.
So will the shed be just moved? You're not gonna rebuild the shed, or are you gonna rebuild a shed and attach it to the building?
So we were planning on rebuilding it, definitely residing it, and then just bringing it forward, I believe, 4 feet.
Yeah. So just keeping the footprint, but extending it by 4 feet forward. Just to gain a little bit of extra
So
space.
you're taking it down and rebuilding, or are you just working with this?
We're working with the existing
The
structure
existing.
as much as possible and trying to maintain what's there.
Okay.
But with what we found through just initial
Exploratory demo.
demolition, it's that there's good bones to work with, but just needing reinforcement.
Okay, got it. And then for your foundation for your addition, is that a poured concrete foundation?
So it's actually piles. So the front deck is on piles. The remaining existing quarters are on a poured foundation.
So what kind of piles are they proposing for the addition? Do you know?
Oh, that's a good question. Is it steel piles?
I believe it was steel.
That's all the questions I have for now, Bob.
Okay, so just for clarity, why don't you leave those pictures up if you could, Mason?
yep, I'm just gonna
On
share some.
on the shed, you're just going to move the shed in its entirety 4 feet forward, and then you're putting the propane tanks behind the shed. Is that what you're doing?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's move on. Woody, questions for Tammy on this one?
Just a clarification question. I understand the shed, I understand it's on the foundation, but you are going up as well with the
Yes.
area of the deck, and then you're basically putting a second floor in this existing structure.
Yes.
Okay. And I don't have any other questions at the moment. I'll
Okay,
speak up.
thank you, Woody.
you.
Mick, questions for Tammy or Margaret on this project?
Yeah, no, it looks like a good project. So the shed is gonna stay. The existing shed is going to stay where it is, and you're just gonna extend it forward 4 feet, right?
Yes.
Okay. And have you guys done a calculation? So I know you have deck that's gonna wrap around the back, like to the kind of north side and east side, you're gonna have deck that wrap around. Correct?
Yes.
So
You're-
yeah,
You're
there's
gonna add a deck, right?
so there is an existing deck that wraps around. We were looking to add, I believe, it was just 80 square feet to complete that deck. So there's Mason, one of those pictures from the back that showed that the deck stops about midway, a little over midway down the back of the house. So repair what's currently there, and if possible, round that out to the end of the house.
And you're gonna have, in this, I'm looking at the picture with the porch and the shed. So that front is gonna extend down in front of the shed onto the existing. Correct? Have you done a calculation of, like existing impervious and what's going to be impervious post-construction? Like where the house is gonna sit? Is there a net loss or a net gain?
So I, just to clarify, because I want to make sure I answer your question correctly.
Yep.
When we talk house, are we thinking the entire structure inclusive of all the decks and shed, or are we talking about just about the property itself that's on the existing cement foundation?
Just,
I think it's
Okay.
the
Everything.
expansion,
Yeah.
yeah, the expansion from, your existing footprint is X. You're extending the deck, it's going to be elevated off the ground. So that's not going to directly impact, it's not going to create an impervious surface. But one question of clarity, I'm confused now. Are you expanding the footprint of your shed by 4 feet? Or are you just moving the shed as it's in its current size forward? Or are you just expanding the shed 4 feet?
We were hoping to expand it 4 feet and not
Okay.
move it, so just
Gotcha.
expand forward by 4 feet.
Okay, so
Um,
that would be an impact on impervious versus pervious, where that sits on the ground.
yeah, I was more concerned, just the extension looks like it will encompass, the picture I'm looking at now is the front picture with the shed and the deck. So the house is going to extend now over that deck, correct? That'll
So-
be now part of the home.
That
Correct.
front deck, it is going to be enclosed and the house will extend over.
Right,
to
just-
it.
right.
Yeah.
That's all I was getting at, Bob, is like how
Yeah,
much more
yeah.
is gonna be roof line as opposed to being open like the deck is right now. That's all I was going for.
Yep, so that's, to answer your question, Mick, it's 192 square feet that will have roof head over that front deck.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
And you were removing how many square feet of the stone driveway and replanting it?
So the brick is 36 square feet.
Okay. So that would be minus 36 square feet. And you said 192 would be the expansion?
So the 192 is just the house. The roof line coming over the front deck, as seen in this picture. The shed 4 feet addition, it would be a 44 square foot difference, so delta there. And then I subtracted the deck. So when we think about sort of living quarters building versus decking, I subtracted 112 square feet from the front deck, which will now be enclosed.
Oh, okay, I am confused, I'm missing something. Can we go back to the site plan? I
Yeah,
think
there's
we
an
have a-
architectural plans that were submitted as well that might be helpful.
Yeah, let's look at those. Because right now, I'm just looking at, Tammy, that you're deducting 36 square feet of brick, let's call it impervious, but you're expanding impervious surface by 236 square feet. So it's a 200-foot net increase on impervious surface, if I'm doing my math correctly and I'm understanding what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, so if you're counting the front deck, then that math makes
Yep.
sense.
We always see the front deck is elevated, so it's not impervious, because water, rain can go through the deck or run underneath it, and it would still be absorbed,
Okay.
into the ground or add to the the water table. Yeah, if we could just put up that,
Yeah, so I got 236 for the impervious and then minus the 36.
yeah, so it's a net 200, okay,
Not 200.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, that's what I was asking.
Okay, now, so on your front, and you're putting, go to the top of the top page, which gives you the front elevation. Okay. And you're adding stairs to the front, are those, what type of stairs you're putting in, guys? What are you thinking?
So we haven't gotten that far. Really, whatever you tell us is okay to put in, we'll do. We're not sort of partial to that. Obviously, we want to make sure it's compliant with the land around it and that it's not disturbing any of the wonderful wildlife there. So you guys totally direct us there. Whatever you have seen others do or what you find or what your recommendation is, we'll take for sure.
Were you thinking like an escalator, Bob, or maybe like
Yeah.
ramp? Or-
Yeah, you know what, is it going to be just wood steps and a wood landing, or are you thinking a masonry set of steps?
No, not masonry. I
Okay,
think
so it would be wood. So I guess the question is, we're trying to figure out what's the impact on impervious versus, pervious surface, so. Wooden steps wouldn't impact on that, so the net 200 stays the same. Okay, Mick, anything else? And I'll circle back once more to everyone just to,
No, no, I'm good. I'm good
Thank
for
you.
now. Thank you. Thanks,
Right.
Tammy and Margaret.
Thanks, Mick.
Frank, any questions on this for either Tammy or Margaret?
None at this time, Bob. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so guys, usually if you were doing an upward expansion, we wouldn't have a problem with that. What we do ask is that you get an email from the building inspector on the 50-50 rule, where that if you exceed, if your cost of your development is going to exceed 50% of the existing value of the structure, not of the structure and lot, then you have to be compliant with current building codes for that district. The expansion, extending the deck, we've entertained that before. It really comes down to me, I guess, is by expanding the footprint of the shed, you're expanding the impervious surface. So it's a close one. I think, I've driven by this, your yard is pretty much a grass yard, right? A grass lawn. Yeah. And it's a fully developed area. So I'm actually fine with the RDA. I think that with the right amount of conditions and getting a determination from the building inspector that this is not going to exceed the 50-50 rule. Simply because if he comes back and says, yes, you are going to exceed it because of the value of your improvements, it changes what's before us, because then you're doing different stuff. But so let me circle back. Mary, I want to circle back to you and follow up on your thoughts.
Yeah, a couple of more questions. So you're in a flood zone here, obviously. So you need do you have any information that the new construction is going to be flood zone compliant? I mean, we don't have the actual ground elevations compared to your, that'll be a building inspector issue, but I'm
Yeah.
raising it because some of it has to do with us in terms of, the type of construction proposed, flow through foundations, and whether or not propane tanks need to be elevated above the flood zone. So we don't have any ground surface elevation to be able to determine that. We
So
don't have up-to-date lot coverage, because the lot coverage requirements include decks and, stairs and all that are part of the lot coverage requirement. So, and you've made some changes to the plan that I don't see reflected in the information I have right now. So I think we need to get some consistency and what, like adding the decks to the architectural plan so that we can see the dimensions of the decks that are proposed compared to what's there now. I just think that there's a bunch of loose ends that aren't here already. I am concerned about consistency with other projects and that, where you're actually constructing an addition within a resource, which is in this case, Boring Lane, subject to flooding, in addition to buffer zone to the marsh, that, we have in the past required notice of intents for those types of projects. So I'm just throwing it out there for the commission to consider.
So-
There would be a number of conditions that we would have to add to any if we did an RDA determination of applicability, and they're difficult to enforce if it's tied to a plan that shows what we're talking about. So some of these things aren't shown. We
No,
don't have a foundation plan, so there's just some missing information.
Yeah, I think Mary makes a good point, Tammy and Margaret, that, at a minimum, you really need to update your plans and your application to reflect your current wishes of construction. So question, on your current foundation, is it a full basement or is it just is it poured concrete or masonry block? I'm just curious.
It's, they're masonry blocks. It's a 4-foot crawl space essentially with
Okay.
a bulkhead.
Okay. Okay. All right, Mary, anything else before I move on to Woody?
Nope.
Okay. Woody, what are your thoughts on this one? Any follow-up questions for
No
Tammy and Margaret?
follow-up questions. Mary brought up some good points,
Yeah,
but
no,
other
she-
than that,
as
nothing else.
she always does.
Yep.
Frank, any further comments for Tammy and Margaret?
I have a question for Mary. Mary, even if they're building on the existing foundation, if it's not more than a 50% increase in value, is it still required to raise the building for flood?
This is
Ignition.
Plymouth, right? So are we this is still the Plum Island Overlay District, Bob?
But you know what? It's similar to John Hartnett's house. I mean, I think the only thing they really have to do, one, they're proposing to put it on piling.
The addition, right?
yeah,
But we
the-
don't know
Just
if
the
it's
addition.
elevated. We don't know if the addition is elevated because there isn't any indication that it is.
I
Above
mean,
the
I
flood zone.
think it would be considered probably a minor renovation because you would match the floor elevation of the first floor for the practicality of that.
Right.
But
The,
I don't know about the building code requirement for for new construction in the flood zone. I assumed you had to increase, raise it so that it's compliant, but
so why
Maybe
don't let me make a suggestion, team, and to you, Tammy and Margaret. I'm going to suggest that you update your plans, you update your drawings, that you talk to the building inspector. Okay, because at a minimum, we're gonna ask you, he's got to give you or send an email to Mason, just basically saying that the 50-50 rule will not apply. And it's really only if you exceed the 50-50 rule, do you have to comply with current flood standards?
So
on-
we've already actually met with Peter on site. We did a site visit with him way before we ever even submitted our plans to have this type of discussion, Mary, that you were talking about, right?
Right,
Want to make sure we're being compliant with the flood elevation or with the elevation due to flooding. We want to make sure that we can build right on the existing footprint as it is from a structural standpoint. So we had Peter come out and just take a look, walk around, looked at the existing foundation, looked at the piles that were underneath the front decking area. And he did give us the go ahead. We did talk about that 50-50 rule. So making sure that we stay underneath that in order to be compliant. So we had already had all those discussions with him that he then gave us the go ahead to submit our permit
Yeah.
for the building.
okay,
So since then, the only changes that have happened have been the extension of the back deck and the shed being
Okay.
extended by 4 feet. So if it's not possible to move forward with those, then we can definitely go down that road. But the plans for the house structure itself have not changed since we had that initial conversation with Peter.
okay.
yeah, the
So
50-50 rule and the floodplain issue are two different things. So just so that they're not overlap. But I think it would be helpful if this plan shows the shed, the type of foundation that's proposed for the addition, the driveway location that where you want to put it, and the table that gives us the impervious area, then we'll have enough information to be able to reference a plan instead of writing a whole bunch of special conditions that would have to cover those things that aren't on the plan. So
yeah, and I think and it sounds like Peter is already made the determination on the 50-50 rule. If he could just quantify that in an email to Mason, that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
So-
And whether or not you have to raise your propane tanks too. I forgot to add that.
Yep, absolutely.
And so what I'm going to suggest is why don't you undertake that that course of action? And why don't we continue this to our March 4th meeting? Okay, and see if we can take this route of an RDA.
Okay,
Okay, yeah, I don't have a problem with the deck because it's not impervious. The shed may become a kicker where that you're actually adding some impervious. The impervious footprint starts to grow. And so you mentioned you were removing stone. And you were replanting it with lawn or something. What was?
Just
Can we go back?
brick.
But you mentioned something about, it almost sounded like, and maybe I misunderstood. You were eliminating some of the stone driveway because you were moving it away from the house, or am I?
there's an existing brick walkway that we want to remove and just.
That's okay, that's the only thing. Okay,
Yeah, and then,
Sounds like the driveway is now just lawn mostly, and you want to actually establish a driveway.
so the driveway where it sits today is not really a driveway.
Yeah.
It's been really not well maintained.
Right.
We were proposing to not change the actual footprint of it, but just move it to a different location on the property.
And what surface do you want to use on the driveway?
Just a gravel driveway, like a
Okay.
bluestone.
all right, any other questions for Tammy and Margaret? Does that sound like a pathway forward for you?
Yeah, and we can definitely connect with Peter, and then make the adjustments that you recommended and come back and discuss on the 4th of March.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the only kicker right now is expanding the shed for me that may trigger it to an NOI. Because it's just the impervious surface. Unless you're actually showing something, typically what we try to do, shouldn't say what we try to do, what we typically request is an offset. You're gonna add impervious surface, what are you eliminating? So that there's no net impact to the resource area. So again, it's just kind of the math thing, but.
Yep.
I mean,
Like
from my
doing grass
perspective,
planting or something to offset those impacts.
yeah.
Yep.
You know, from my perspective, the deck is part of the footprint. Incorporating that in the house, I mean, for me personally, that doesn't bother me. And the extension of the deck, which is not going to be any closer to the resource because it's going to match what's existing, isn't a stumbling block for me, but the shed might be. So just forewarn you with that. So with that, I'm going to recommend that you ask us to continue this to our March 4th meeting.
Do we ask you?
Yeah, you have, this isn't really a public hearing, but it's a public meeting. And if you would like us to do that, we will do that.
Yes, we'd like to ask to continue this to the March 4th meeting.
Okay. All right, well, thank you guys. Because it's not a public hearing, it doesn't require a formal vote of the board to continue the public hearing. All right, good luck. And like I say, the key thing is getting that email from Peter, and it sounds like he's already made a decision on that. Okay, moving on. We have 3 outstanding enforcement orders. 30 Riverview, 62 Middle Road, and 105 Northern Boulevard. None of these require any action on the part of the commission tonight, so I'm going to move on. We have no extension requests. We have no certificate of compliance requests. So I'm going to move to the first continued public hearing. It's DEP file number 0501436 for 286 High Road to construct an addition to the existing single-family dwelling with associated utilities, expanded driveway within 100 foot of the buffer to the salt marsh area. Now, this has been changed, and I see Bill Holt is on the call.
Yep.
Mason, why don't you give us an update? Team, there was a revised site plan added to the Dropbox box today. Did that come in today? When did you get that plan, Mason?
No, I believe that was before today.
Okay. Okay, so
No.
Tim, I may have just added that today, would have been, you click on the link. There was that, and then there was a Kent Way buffer analysis that had been provided, or Kent Island, excuse me, for the last two additions to the Dropbox. And like magic, Bill puts up the plan.
I think it was Mason.
Oh, okay. Bill, why don't you identify yourself if you would, and let's give us your presentation. It sounds like you've modified your approach and have drastically reduced the project and scope.
Yes, and I'd like to be able to explain that to you and bring you up to date. And notice that the applicant and his architect is not on the meeting. I don't know why, but so I'm going to give you an update and we'll go over it briefly what the changes are, which are significant. And then if you have any questions in regards to what they're actually doing with the building, that would be the applicant and the inside the building. That would be the applicant and the architect, which I really can't explain, but I'll explain the site work that we're proposing now. Can I share my screen, Mason, so that move around? Yeah. Yep, it says disabled still.
Should be good to go now.
Okay. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
So on the left-hand side, you'll see the current existing conditions. Which is the existing house, existing barn, the existing driveway. With a 100-foot resource off of the marsh. And we have the 200 and 100-foot buffer zone, I mean, our riverfront area down here, which is kind of in dispute with DEP. And I'm going to cover that in just a second, because I have a second diagram which you haven't seen, which I will bring up just to kind of go over the impact of the riverfront area, which we believe is zero. Again, we're not changing anything on the site ultimately. So this is the new site plan. Mr. Hasker and his architect went back and forth with historical commission, historical buildings, and there was some pushback from them on the increase in the size of the building, or the additions in the driveway. So long and short of it is that Ron decided to just cut everything back. He just wants to take this existing barn and basically rebuild it on a new foundation. So we have eliminated the proposed driveway, which if you recall was down on this side, sort of provided access to a garage under that was going to be created, and a turnaround driveway, which is going to cause some vegetation to be removed, a couple of large trees. So that's been eliminated completely. So we're just going to stick with the existing driveway as it is. He's going to take the building, raise the building carefully, piece by piece. They're going to save all the materials that are, the wood, the siding, the structure itself that is salvageable. Going to salvage all that with the numbering it so they can try to put it back together in the same order, in the same way. And then they're going to remove that off-site, probably restore some of the components of it that need to be and replace ones that they can, by building new members and all that, new wood frame structures and all that will replace what's there. Pour a new foundation in the exact same location, same size, same height. Discussing it with the historical commission, they cannot increase the height of the building, the roof line, so they have to match what's there. So the foundation will be the same height. Then they're going to rebuild the whole structure back on top of that new foundation to give it a good base. And of course, they want to try to renovate the inside, remodel it. One of the renovations that he really kind of wants is a new bathroom in that outbuilding, just to keep it so you can use the bathroom out there rather than having to go into the house. What that will require is obviously a new pipe coming out of the house, out of the barn, and a new pump chamber that will be in the ground, located in this area, which is essentially lawn right now. And then a new pipe going into the existing house, which will be pumped into the existing house, connected to the interior plumbing, and will go into the tank and then out into the system. This doesn't change any of the capacity requirements for the septic. It's basically adding a bathroom. You can always add a bathroom to a garage or a barn or an outbuilding without changing the flows required for Title V or increasing the size of the system. So it's basically from the Board of Health standpoint, we haven't filed with them yet. We want to get to conservation first, but we will file a plan with that proposed tank and a pump design for it. So it's essentially what we did was we brought some of the erosion control back. It's now up. Well, we need some room to be able to do this construction work, so we have it set back some, but we brought it up above. We had originally on the original tree line, and then actually went into the tree line over here, so we had some disturbance of the vegetation in this area. We brought that all back up. We're going to save this tree. This small tree here that's just to the right of the barn will probably be in jeopardy. I'll try to save it, but it'll probably be in jeopardy with all the work that's going on to dig the foundation, stockpile the soil. It's from that, and then rebuild that foundation, rebuild the actual structure. So we think that tree may be in jeopardy. If it is, they'll replace it with a similar tree in a similar location once it's done. There is some landscaping in this area as well that will be replaced. Be disturbed during construction, we replaced after the construction. And that's essentially really the only change as far as the vegetation goes, is that we're not going to be cutting any of this vegetation down. And so the limit of work has been brought up to eliminate some of the disturbance closer to the existing vegetation. And no driveway and no addition. So it's really scaled back quite a bit. So I have a chart here that describes basically all the impacts to the resources, and essentially the table of a lot area alterations, including all the impervious areas, the house, barn, pavers, the walk, pavers for the drive, the decks that are here, the decks that are freestanding that are already attached to the house, attached to the barn, and summarized all that at 4,427 square feet. And the lawn and landscaping, which is previous alteration areas on the lot and within that 200 foot and within 100 foot, and that goes up to 11,000, a total of 15,605 square feet. And then there's remaining about 5,479 square feet of unaltered tree line. It's basically unaltered trees and shrubs that are beyond the tree line existing. Within the riverfront area, right now we're showing zero work because we're using the riverfront that we had from 2014, which is the bank of the Parker River. If you recall, DEP identified on the USGS a ditch. We call it a ditch, or they call it a stream. You can actually see the corner right here is portion of it that kind of comes down and goes back out to right before the bridge. It's where it enters the Parker River. And this ditch is sort of parallel to the actual river itself. And then there's a couple of smaller man-made ditches that come off that, which are for drainage flow out of catch basins on Route 1. And this is just flow through I think it was probably mosquito ditch that was dug through the marsh. Now these we have seen not flowing, and we have seen them. They're not actually these side ditches are not located on the USGS map, so they don't show up on that. And I have seen them dry, both of these. We have not been able to see it. I saw it dry once, but I wasn't really convinced that it was because it wasn't flowing. It was just because it was ice. It was winter. It was tough to see exactly how much flow, if any, was coming out at the inlet to the Parker River. So I'm not convinced this is either going to be a perennial stream, but I don't have the evidence. We don't have the evidence now to say it's not. If you call that a stream, that ditch that goes parallel to the river. I have another sketch here, which will show you. Increase the size of this a little bit so you can see it a little easier. Yeah. So here's that a piece of that ditch that goes parallel to the stream, which is on the USGS map. And here's the ditches that are not. And so I put in here, it's intermittent, it's reserved dry, we know no flow, and same with this one. So I don't think these are going to be anywhere, won't be considered perennial streams or part of the river. Whereas I think that might be. And if we did say that was, and we acquiesced and just said, we agree that that's a perennial stream, here's the 100-foot, and here's the 200-foot. And then, of course, you get more riverfront area on the lot. However, again, we're not changing anything. This is already lawn and, landscaping, the pavers on the driveway, the existing barn, existing house. All the riverfront area that's altered is going to stay the same. They don't consider the lawn to be, it's altered, but it's more pervious, that it's not the same criteria as, it's not as much disturbance in the riverfront as driveways and buildings are. So I think this comes out to be 14,000 square feet of area in the riverfront. And again, this little part of the driveway is not in the riverfront. So that takes out that little portion, but there's about 14,000. It's in the chart on the bottom of this plan. I didn't give you this plan because my client wouldn't want to acquiesce to the actual riverfront, but I just kind of demonstrating that if it is, we do have more riverfront area, but we're not altering the additional riverfront area. It's going to stay the same as it is. So we have no increase in alteration of the riverfront area by doing this reduced proposed work that from what was originally proposed. Obviously, the original proposed work would have increased some impervious area within the riverfront. It would have altered the riverfront even further. So just kind of trying to demonstrate that no matter what the riverfront comes out to be, whether DEP is correct. And it is,
I think we get it, Bill. I mean, basically, you're not changing the footprint or the size of the existing structure. I mean, honestly, the only thing you're going to be adding differently would be the pump chamber.
Right. If I had done this originally, I would have said let's file an RDA personally, but
Yeah.
so I think it's very limited. If you have questions on what's going to happen in the building, I cannot say exactly. I know they're going to remodel it, but I don't know exactly what they're planning on doing. I do know that the outside will look very similar to what's there now, because they're sort of required to replace it in a similar manner for the historic.
Bill, why don't you hold there and let me just ask a couple of questions.
Sure.
Have there been any additional DEP technical comments? This has been submitted. Have they made any technical comments on this submittal?
I just submitted it, so I don't have anything. So
Okay.
We'll need to probably continue it for 2 weeks and see if there's any comments on this particular new plan. I'm hoping that they will say, hey, we agree. Either way, whether the riverfront is more or less, there's going to be no change in the actual work on the site or the conditions of the site.
So, I mean, from my perspective, you're not increasing the footprint, you're not increasing impervious surface. You're basically doing a renovation.
Mhm.
The only thing you're adding is the pump chamber, and I
That's
mean,
underground. It will be
yeah, that's underground.
stored to a lawn and
Yeah.
cross over the walkway, which we may jack that under so they don't have to even dig it up.
Okay. Okay, those are my questions at the moment. Mary, what questions do you have?
No, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. This is,
Yeah,
even if it is a river, which I don't think it is, that it would be redevelopment of an existing previously developed riverfront area. So it's not, it doesn't present a problem. If you do get updated comments from DEP, you'd have to get them by contacting the reviewer, finding out who the reviewer is and getting them directly over the phone. They won't update their website, so.
Okay.
But, it's good that you've submitted the revised plan. I don't have a problem closing the hearing with this revised plan, if that's the plan of record. I don't have any other comments, really.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Mary. I agree as well. Woody, what do you, any questions? What are your thoughts on this modified application?
Looks pretty straightforward, and I don't have any comments or questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Woody. Mick, any questions or comments on?
Yeah, just, Couple of quick questions regarding the existing barn foundation. So you're gonna be knocking that out, Bill?
Yes, they'll be removing whatever remnants of I think it's a stone foundation now. They'll be removing that and actually be pouring a new concrete foundation at the
Is it-
same size.
Yeah, is it concrete floor now or?
It's not,
pour-
not concrete now. No, it's stone.
Oh, interesting. So it, any,
Very old building. Maybe it dates back to the 1700s.
yeah, I'm familiar with it. We all are, I think. Any evidence or any like historical use that you would be concerned about, any soils or any material that you pull out of there that might be impacted? Like, has there been like boat restoration or boat work or fuels used in there, things like that?
That I do not know. I know when I actually did the septic repair back in 2014, and we had reasonable soils in that location.
So,
It was good for septic, so it was natural material.
yeah,
It's likely it's likely there's some fill on this site. I mean, I really can't speak to that because it's been 300 years in use. So I don't know.
Right.
I don't know if
It-
any
it-
boats myself personally ever been. I think it's been it was a ticket house or something like that.
You
Toll
might
Oh,
find,
really?
you
Okay.
might find Jimmy Hoffa in your garage.
Well, I'm just as a suggestion, kind of, just include precautions that if we encounter impacted soils, we will, we'll put them on poly. We'll have bales around them for your spoils location.
Yeah.
That's all I would suggest,
If there's
just as a just in case.
any indication of any kind of volatile compounds like oil,
Yeah.
and gas, they'd have to call in an LSP and deal with it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Not a fun thing, but
No, it's just, you never know what you're gonna run into, right? When you start digging a hole, so. Especially, next to a river, if there was boat activity, I'm just saying, just, have that contingency in your plan that if we do encounter impacted soils or if we see a sheen or something like that, we're gonna, put the soils on poly, we'll have bales, we'll do, soil testing or whatever, just as a contingency, that's all I suggest.
Yeah, Bill, if you discover that you have a volatile organic compound issue of some sort, like you say, you're gonna get an LSP, and you're gonna come back and just give us a heads up with what
Yeah.
they're going to
Yeah,
do, and we
I'm
can
sure
consider
Mason
the.
will be reviewing this when they do the work, and obviously the building inspector as well. So they have to do inspections. If they see anything, we encounter anything or they see anything, they'll. I mean, I would just
Okay.
I would suggest maybe a condition in your order of conditions that says anything found, you must contact the LSP, contact the conservation, contact the building inspector.
But that's state law already, though. I mean,
It
that's
is.
Probably.
It really
People
is.
too.
So
Mick,
Um,
anything else you want to add?
No,
I think that
no,
was-
I think there's
That
no
was more,
change.
yeah, that was more of a guidance question, I think.
Yeah, just, have a contingency plan in place in case you do, you never know
Yeah.
when you start digging a hole. No, otherwise, it's no change in footprint here. It really, I think even Bill said it's more RDA at this point, but we're already at the NOI.
Yeah.
All right, anything else, Mick?
No, thank you. Thanks,
All
Bill.
Thank you, Mick.
Right.
Frank, any questions or concerns on this revised submittal?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. I don't have any further questions. Mary, any follow-up before I open this up to public comment?
No, other than I'm afraid I'm gonna have to log off now, so
Okay.
thank you.
Mary, you're in favor of closing public hearing and moving on to considering
Yes.
an NOI with conditions? All right, thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you.
Okay. Mason, do we have any hands raised from the public on this project?
Seeing none.
Okay. All right. Do any members have a request for additional information, plan amendment, or adding additional content to this notice of intent?
I do not.
Okay.
No.
Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So move.
Okay, Mick,
Second,
was that you, Frank?
yes.
Okay. Okay, roll call. All in favor? Woody,
Yes,
Mick,
Aye.
Frank,
Yes.
and Bob Connors votes yes. All right, now comes what do we see for special conditions outside of ordinary conditions? Mason, do you see anything that outside of our typical conditions that seem pertinent. I think Bill was exactly right. This would probably come back as an RDA and been a lot less painless for the owner.
Yeah, no, I don't have any other suggestions for special conditions at this time.
Any special conditions that we want to entertain? I'm fine with just the usual condition.
Agreed.
The
Okay,
usual
great.
sounds good. The usual sounds
Right.
good. They get erosion control, so everything.
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah, the plan is very inclusive of what we need to do.
Yeah.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to issue an order of conditions for 286 High Road with our usual conditions.
So moved.
Second,
Thank you, Frank. Okay, roll call in favor. Woody,
Yes,
Mick?
Aye.
Frank?
yes.
Bob Connors says yes. Bill, thank you.
You.
Bill, the only thing is if the Board of Health gives you any changes, anything on the pump tank, which I just can't imagine, then, let Mason know and then we'll determine if
If
it's.
any modifications
yeah.
for that, I can, I'll
Yeah.
give Mason a copy of the plan and then you can look at it as if it's a major or minor or. needs to have-
Yeah, I can't imagine it's gonna be anything.
All right,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
All right, continue public hearing, DEP file number 0501442, Locken Road dam removal. Gomez and Sullivan have submitted a notice of intent for ecological restoration project off of Locken Road. Project involves removing the Locken Road Dam to restore fish runs, and major project elements include removing the dam, installing stone scour protection for the I-95 bridge, and removing a small existing weir upstream. Project team and partners have completed all regulatory reviews in preparation. Mason, why don't you give us a recap of where we're at on this?
Yeah, so from the last meeting, it seems like the project team had answered all the questions from the commission. And we were just kind of waiting on the 401 water quality certification from the state. But after further guidance from the person reviewing 401s at the state, as well as the circuit rider, it is not dependent on the commission's issuance of the order of conditions. So if the commission is interested and so moves, then we would issue the order conditions before that permit was acquired.
Okay. Susie, one question, I received a question from a resident, and it was simply on the USGS gauge station. And his question was, does that require a permit or approval from USGS to relocate that? And I had sent him all the docs that you had provided. But I said I would ask the question rather than look through everything and try to find it.
Sure. Yeah. So the gauge station won't be moved. What's there now is a weir that sort of sets the channel bottom at a more uniform shape, which makes it easy for their gauging station to collect or record data. But the gauging station will remain, the shape of the channel bottom will just change. So we're going to remove the weir and in place put what's called a riffle, which is just basically a very sturdy channel bottom with larger rock, which will ensure that the channel bottom stays in place and stays in the shape as it's built as part of the project. So effectively, nothing really will change. The only difference that USGS will have to do is recalibrate the station to account for the different shape of the channel bottom. So just to clarify that part, but USGS has been a part of the project. We've consulted with them and had meetings with them multiple times, both on site and virtually, talking about the project, and they've supported the project. Earlier on, a few different options of what to do with the USGS gauge was looked at. This was in earlier design phases, I think a couple years ago, and our team, along with USGS and the DCR Water Resources Commission, I believe it is, went out and looked at a few different sites to potentially relocate the gauge as one option to deal with this project. but didn't find a suitable site. So they everyone agreed that just removing the weir, setting the channel bottom with a riffle, and then recalibrating the gauge was the best option. So we as the project team are gonna pay for the cost of USGS to recalibrate the gauge and kind of reset their gauging station. And that's part of our project budget. But otherwise there isn't a formal approval
Perfect.
process, but we have been
Okay.
working closely with them.
Nope, thank you for that. All right, Mason, what was the other, I know there was a discussion with the Byfield Water District, and where did that end up? I know that they were hiring a peer review consultant.
Yeah,
Honestly, a little late in the process at this time, but
Yeah, they had brought up some questions to me that I relayed over to Jill, and Jill had outlined all the answers to those questions in an email. But it sounded like Byfield Water District was still interested in hiring third-party review for questions. But at this time, that's the only thing that we've heard.
okay. Well, hopefully someone's on the call from Byfield Water if they want to discuss that. Okay, I'm going to open this up to questions from the members. Woody, do you have any additional questions on this project?
None at the moment. I'm good for now. Thank you.
Mick, are there any questions on this one?
No further questions right now, Bob. Thank you.
Okay. Frank, any questions for Susie or Mason?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. So Susie, there was a couple of minor changes. Mason, you would mention that did the town have to contact the abutter? Was there did something change in the staging area that we talked about it? And all these projects start to blend together. I apologize.
I don't think so. I don't think there's been any
Okay.
updates or changes since the last meeting.
Okay. Do any members have any additional comments or questions? Or Mason, yourself, any additional comments or questions?
Nope.
No.
Okay. I'm going to
Also-
open this up to the public. Are there any raised hands from the public that would like to ask questions or make a comment on this application? See a lot of names here, but if you do, if you would, just give us your name and address. And if not, that's okay too. Okay. Mason, you reached out to Byfield Water Commission today to let them know
Yep.
that.
They're aware that the meeting is tonight, and that if they wanted their questions reviewed by the commission, that they'd need to be present.
Okay, and they've made no request to continue the public hearing until their peer review came in?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So Tim, I think
Oh, sorry, Bob, go ahead.
yeah, no, I was just going to say, so the only open issue would be they're having a peer review done. Again, it's a little late in the process, and I know that the design team has done a detailed review of groundwater and explained the impacts and where the well field is downstream. So I guess the only question open is we've received information that Byfield Water has, engaged a third-party peer review. We don't know if that's been completed. We don't know what the status of that is. So the worst case is, do we continue this for a couple of weeks, or do we proceed with the information we have, which is there's been no such request, and close the public hearing? Susie, you wanted to add some comments?
Oh, I was just gonna say, if it's helpful for the commission, I'm happy to respond and sort of explain
Yeah,
what
if you would, yeah.
Jill explained to the Byfield Water District, if that's helpful.
Okay. Yeah, I think that'd be, adding clarity is always helpful.
Sure. So as I understand, they have two wells that are located downstream of the dam. And they had brought up these concerns to us earlier on in the project. I think this was before I was involved in the project, so at least 2 years ago. And so Jill did investigate the well specifically as part of the most recent design report, which was finished last year. And so as a part of that review, they looked at the impact of water surface elevations downstream on the wells, and if removal of the dam would change the elevations in the wells. And so this is a run-of-river dam, which I think the most useful way to think of it is essentially like a speed bump in the river. So the same amount of water enters upstream as leaves downstream. And by removing the speed bump, effectively nothing changes downstream. It's just that the water upstream of the speed bump now moves faster and doesn't get impounded, but downstream nothing changes. So because the wells are downstream and it's a run of river dam, there will be no impact downstream. The water surface elevation in the river will be the same under all flow conditions as it would be with the dam in place. So that was the main conclusion of the study. They also had some questions about, this wasn't brought up most recently, but earlier on they had questions about contaminants in the wells. We did some extensive sediment analysis, which is being reviewed as a part of the 401 water quality cert. And there were no contamination levels that exceeded the S1 standards for drinking water. The soils where the sediment was relatively clean. And where there were some small exceedances for ecological impacts, we saw the same contamination levels downstream as well as upstream. So there's no difference in the sediment behind the dam as it currently exists downstream. So that's one piece of it. Also, there's no real pathway for the sediments to get from the river to the wells. The wells are not impacted by surface water. So the water where they pull from is not within influence of water surface. So, the surface water couldn't transport the sediments to the wells in a way that it would impact the water that they draw from. So all of those things are outlined in the report, and Jill sent an email, as Mason mentioned, sort of pointing to the sections of the report where that's all explained, and provided a few figures as well to further explain it. And I believe she talked to a couple different people at the Byfield Water District, and it sounds like one of the people thought that this was, made sense and they understood the explanation, and then another person said that they're still going to go with the peer review. So we're happy to continue working with them. Whether the commission decides to close the hearing tonight or not, we'll continue working with them through their peer review process.
Okay. All right, do we have any other questions from the members? I mean, I'm good to go on this one. I think that this has been, what's this, our third or fourth meeting on this?
No questions, Bob.
Okay,
Well vetted, Bob, I think. I'm good.
okay. Mason, just another double check. Are there anyone from the the public that has raised hands?
Not seeing any.
Okay. Do any members have a request for additional information, plan amendment, or adding additional content to this notice of intent?
I do not.
Okay. Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved?
Second,
Okay. Roll call, all in favor? Woody,
Yes.
Mick,
Yes.
Frank,
yes.
and Bob Connors votes yes. Okay, what special conditions with this is our ecological restoration project, the checklist is pretty substantial on this, and we don't have a lot of wiggle room to reinvent the wheel on conditions on this. So I think the only thing is, and I think it's just going to be our typical preliminary. When Susie, were you on the site walk when we
Yep.
were all out there?
Mhm.
So I think in the field, what we talked about was, certainly having a pre-start meeting with Mason, that trees that were being proposed would be cut, would be flagged before that.
Mhm.
And I think, what was the other thing? I really think that was the only thing. You were going to, on the rubble, you were going to lose that on site, as I recall, or you were going to live load and haul it off, or what was?
On which one? Sorry.
No, this is when you're removing the fish ladder.
Mhm.
You were going to fill that in originally to use it as a pathway
Yep.
to remove the dam. And then as you backed out, you were gonna remove all the rubble and just restore it to a natural gravel or compatible substrate.
Mhm.
You're gonna haul all that material off-site or,
Yeah, all the concrete will be taken off site.
okay. What about the stone? I mean, a lot of that is just, the fish ladder was primarily, I thought, stone. You're just gonna leave that still over it.
We should double check with Jill, but if there's any natural materials, I think they would
Oh,
stay on
okay.
site, but yeah, any
Okay.
concrete would come
So any
off-site.
man-made materials would be hauled off-site, removed and hauled
Yeah.
off-site. Okay, so for what I'd like to see, Mason, is that we just reference that we're going to have a pre-start meeting with the agent to go over scope, staging area, that trees that are proposed to be cut will be flagged, and that all man-made materials will be removed and hauled off-site. Mick, anything you want to add to that? That when you look at the checklist, it's pretty detailed.
No, it's pretty comprehensive, definitely.
Yeah.
No, I don't have anything to add, Bob. I think we're,
Okay, Woody,
Good.
anything you want to add on that?
No,
You're at the
I'm
site
good.
inspection.
I'm good. Everything looks good.
Okay, Frank, how about yourself?
No, I'm all set. Thank you, Bob.
Okay, all right, I will entertain a motion to issue an order conditions for the Locken Road dam removal with the conditions that I just proposed to be incorporated.
So
so
moved.
moved.
Okay, so Woody, you made the motion?
Yep.
Mick, you seconded?
Second,
Okay. Okay, roll call vote, all in favor? Woody,
Yes.
Mick,
all right?
Frank,
Yes.
and Bob Connors votes yes. Thank you, Susie. Looking forward to the start of this. I know Mason is just dying to be out there every week following this thing.
Cool. Yeah, me too.
Okay.
I'm really excited. So thanks everyone for your time. We really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll be in
Okay.
touch when we get going.
Yeah,
You're
and like I say, what
Wildfire season, right?
I think the big thing, Susie, is that work with the Byfield Water District, because you've got the appeal period, so.
Yep.
I think if you work with them, you may be able to forego a bump.
Yep. Yeah, we'll definitely continue to working with them. And Jill is already connected with the person that they've hired to do the peer review. So
Okay.
yeah, I think we're on track there, but we'll definitely let you know if anything else comes up.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next
Bob.
matter is a continued public hearing, DEP file number 0501443, 173 Hay Street, Kent Island. Division of Fisheries and Wildlife is submitting a notice of intent for an ecological restoration limited project, the habitat restoration work at the William Forward Wildlife Management Area. Management techniques include invasive plant control, general vegetation control, prescribed fire, and timber harvest. Project documents include maps of the project area. Mason, why don't you give us an update on this? I know there was one addition to the Dropbox Today team, and it was a buffer zone submittal that had been provided to the commission.
Yeah, so Ben had also submitted a document which I had shared with everyone that kind of outlines the specific techniques in relation to each buffer zone or resource area. So that can also be seen in the Dropbox.
Okay, Ben, anything else, Mason, before I open this up to Ben?
Nope, that's all.
Okay, Ben, good evening. Just identify yourself and provide an update for the commission and answer questions as they're proposed.
Sure. Ben Mazii, habitat biologist, work for Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife. Submitted the NOI documentation. We had our first meeting last week. We had tried to schedule a site visit, but apparently it snows a lot in February, and we couldn't quite make that happen yet. So part of the continuance was to try to get a site visit. The other part was the commission had asked me to provide more information on each resource and buffer zone. So I went out and documented all of the species found in the buffer zone and wetlands for each of the wetlands, and provided that with pictures and maps and detailed techniques on what we're proposing to do to treat the invasive plants in each of those areas.
Okay. So Mason, you had an email from Mary. She had a number of questions.
Yep.
Mary had a conflict after 7 o'clock and had to go to another meeting. Mason, do you want to just read those and we'll go over them and Ben can respond to them? And
Yep. So the first one was the proposed limits of work in the plan provided does not correspond with the parcel boundaries, which is larger. So Mary wanted to see the actual area of the actual square footage of the work area.
Can you just repeat that again, Mason?
you know what we'll do, Ben? We'll forward you the email so you'll have
Okay.
all of the comments on it. I don't think Mary would have a problem with that. It becomes a public record once it lands in Mason's Dropbox.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
I just sent that over, Ben.
Okay.
Yeah, why don't you look at them, Ben, and we'll talk about them in general terms and then what next steps, okay? Hopefully that
Just give me one
Yeah.
second. Email just came through.
okay. It'll be less laborious that we're all looking at the same doc and not testing Mason's oratory skills at 7:19 at night. So Ben, just as a recap from the last meeting, I think in general terms, the project was favorably received. Sounds like it's going to be a great improvement to the area and to the resource. The hang up for me was we always require, or even the department will require, a site plan, wetland delineation, proposed work versus existing conditions. So that's the only hang up that I have. And again, we've asked every one of our applicants to do that, including RDAs. And I think that Mary's questions here. So why don't we do this? Let's go to Mary's first question. You see it there. It's proposed limits of work in the plan provided does not correspond with the parcel boundaries, which is larger. So we'll need the actual area of the actual square footage of work area.
Okay, so I guess I'm not clear on on what she's asking there, I guess. So she's saying the proposed limits of the work in the plan does not correspond with the parcel boundaries. So the parcel of what Mass Wildlife owns?
Well, I think it's the work area that you're going to be in. Your work isn't just limited to upland areas, correct?
No, it is not. That's why,
Right.
yep.
Yeah, that's why you're before us. So
Yep.
I think in concept, I think it's a favorable project. It just the paperwork doesn't confirm. What will happen is when you're coming in for a certificate of compliance, we don't have a plan to really reference these trees were going to be cut and this work was going to be done versus what's existing and what the proposed work would be. And that's one hang up that I have. That's actually the only hang up. There's some other material things as far as just means and methods of how we're going to access stuff. What are you using for cutting trees? Is it going to be all manual, or are you bringing out skid steers and stuff like that? Just and what pathway and stuff like that. But
Sure. As far as the cutting, so a forest cutting plan was already submitted. It was reviewed. The forest cutting plan is required under the Forest Cutting Plan Act to be reviewed by Conservation Commission. So
yeah.
That was submitted with the plan and approved by the Service Forester. So the work that is proposed under that forest cutting plan is going to involve a feller buncher and a forwarder. Skid roads have been flagged as is required under Chapter 1
Okay.
forest cutting plan, and any of the wetlands that are near where those skid roads are or where the cutting are required to be flagged with wetland flagging, and that has been accomplished already. So I'm happy.
Is that on, but is that on a plan though? I mean, I think that's where we're struggling, that, you know, normally it sounds like you've done the wetland delineation in the work zone with the flagging.
Well, so there's 5 freshwater resource areas. So the ones that are impacted that are related to the forest cutting plan have wetland delineation flags around them. If the commission requires me to put flagging around all the other 3, then I can get that done this week. That's not a problem. Yeah. So originally the issue is that for us, the wetlands that we're just treating invasives on, we're not proposing a difference in treatment for the buffer zone and the resource area, because the invasives are pretty heavy across both of that. So I'm happy to do that if the commission requires it, but there's not going to be a difference in, I mean, we're still spot treating invasive plants. Anything that's taller than 6 feet would be cut stem treated. So we're applying selective herbicide to individual plants. We're not broadcast spraying in the wetlands or the buffer zone. So that's why the more remote ones that aren't being impacted by forestry operations have not been flagged. I'm happy to do that if that's the requirement of the commission. But the ones that are under the forest cutting plan have been done that way, yes.
I mean, honestly, Ben, I think if you had the site plan with the delineation and propose, you have a massive project in a good sized area, and it's tough to put all the pieces together without a cohesive plan. Just walking us through that and having something that is memorialized. So when the product is done, when you've finished your work, you know, we have a plan to refer to that covers the scope of your work.
Sure. And so I don't know if the commission has had a chance to look at the document that I submitted on Monday to Mason, and that essentially.
It didn't have a site plan in it though, showing it. Again, it was a number of pages that, you know, to be honest with you, I looked at it today and I put it in the Dropbox for the commission. Is there a site plan in that package? I looked through it quickly. I didn't see a.
So as far as like an overall site plan for the entire WMA, no, that's not in there. That's specific, what's in there are specific management techniques to the areas that we are proposing to do work. So everything that we're proposing to do, I've described in that document that I sent. I've labeled it on a map. I've provided the natural plant communities are there, and all the techniques that we're doing for the areas within there. So it's essentially a site plan for Kents Island for those areas.
All right, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to open this up to questions. Mick, what are your questions on this? You're on mute, Mick.
I don't have any specific, it's a lot of information to kind of get my head around, you know, right now. But I do agree, Bob, that there's reference to several different wetland areas, and it'd be good to have those delineated. And just, you know, following up with what you said, it's good to have those delineated on a map so we can see where the different treatment zones are and where the different cutting zones are. There's a figure 1 provided here, but to provide, I think, the level of detail that we need to move forward.
Okay, thank you, Mick. What are your thoughts on this?
I agree with what's just been said and what you've been saying. Otherwise, I don't have any other questions or comments. So if it was delineated properly on a map, it would be great.
Okay, thank you, Woody. Frank, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm looking at the document he sent, and at the very end, there's a figure 1 map. I'm not sure if this is what you're looking for, Bob, or if you're looking for a more detailed map than this. But it does show in yellow highlight, the Kents Island NOI prescribed fire project area.
Yeah, you know what, I mean, what we typically look for, Frank, and I'll just refer to your neighbor at 30 Riverview. Uh, for an RDA, we required them to have a site plan. They hired a wetland consultant. I
Right.
don't, they determined, they did a delineation to determine what, if any, impacts had on it. And that was fixing a puddle in the yard.
Right.
It's just, obviously the board likes to have consistency with all the applicants. And I mean, Ben, from my perspective, you need a stamped site plan. Wherever you're doing work, it all got to be tied into one plan. That's what we require from everybody else, and we would expect the Commonwealth to set a good example. Well, because otherwise, we're just going to hear from everyone else if we don't require this from the Commonwealth of Mass. That why am I doing it to put a deck in my yard when, we have a multi-acre area and resource areas and.
Yeah, so Bob, I'm clear, you want Mass Wildlife to hire an engineer to provide a stamp on a plan? I guess I'm unclear on exactly what you want as far as a stamped plan.
What we typically require is a stamped site plan that
Stamped by
encompasses.
who? I guess
Well,
is
it
my,
would be a professional surveyor or a professional engineer, whoever can do a survey and put it on a plan. And then identify the proposed work in areas. Existing conditions could be what the wetland, what the invasive is, and the proposed work is how are you going to treat it, and identify it by zone. And I mean, I think honestly, I would expect that to be part of the package, Ben. I know there's a cost involved in that, but we have people that are putting on a 10 by 10 deck and they're required to follow the same process. And when we don't do it, DEP technical comments say, well, you must do it. So
Eric, can I just, so I can point out, so I've been working for Mass Wildlife for close to 20 years and have filed NOIs and RDAs across the Commonwealth. And this is the first time me or any of my colleagues that work for Mass Wildlife, and we've done the same process, have ever been required to provide a engineered stamp plan for this type of work. So I don't know how we can do that as an agency as far as resources. I have taken Scott Jackson's delineation class at UMass. I've delineated tons of wetlands before. I can delineate the wetlands. I've provided the information on current conditions, proposed conditions in the document I sent today or this week to Mason. But as far as Mass Wildlife hiring an engineer, I don't know how that, we've never done that before. I don't know how that process would work.
Ben,
No.
hang on one second. Mason, you have your hand raised. Maybe you have some.
Yeah,
Information.
just reviewing Mary's email again, she had made a comment towards the end, saying that she doesn't feel that a stamped survey or engineer plan is necessarily required for an ecological restoration project where there's no structures or grade changes proposed, as long as the plan shows the required elements. She says that they're not typically required for ecological restoration projects.
In her opinion.
Correct.
I believe I'm going to do whatever the commission would like. I want to make sure that you guys get everything you need. Yes, it's just something that's not been required from us, from DEP. And we've filed dozens and dozens of these. I've never been required to provide that. I'm just confused, so.
No, listen, Ben, I understand it. Ben, this is honestly, it's no reflection on the submittal that you've done. You've provided a tremendous amount of material and detail. But as you can imagine, for the commission to put it all in perspective, you've got a number of different actions that you're proposing. I mean, one thing we always require is, prior to start of construction, that trees that are going to be cut are going to be flagged, and then we compare that to wetland delineation. Certainly anything that's upland, you have the appropriate, appropriate permits for. And it's just,
I'm
then-
happy to put flagging out across every area that the commission has jurisdiction over. The issue would be that, you know, for prescribed fire, which we're proposing to do under the, you know, approved burn plan through the fire department, you know, there
Right.
will be, I mean, we're not gonna burn tons of marsh, but we are gonna proposing to burn portions of the marsh just adjacent to the island in different years. And
Mhm.
so I don't know how that, I don't really want to put flagging in the marsh.
You know what, let me just give this some more thought, Ben, to see if we can find a solution. If you flag all the trees that you propose to cut, and then you can identify the wetland delineation in that area. And obviously, I think that would be helpful. That's what we would typically see on a plan. We would have the, you know, the delineation flag numbers, you know, versus the trees. I mean, I don't know how else we can do this. Mick, you're sitting there in deep thought. You want to add some comments here? How do we find a solution to this?
No, I see, I'm looking at, you know, Ben's plan here. And you can see, you know, to Frank's point, where areas have been delineated, I think really better, I think maybe going along with Bob, there's a kind of gray area that we don't see delineated in a plan. Like you have your burn plan and like, where is that? Where's the extent of that burn plan? But you know, Bob, you alluded to, you know, marking trees and marking wetland areas within those, or in the vicinity of those, of trees to be removed. And, you know, if we could get in, if that could be marked out, and then if you could, you know, GPS those points in so we can see them on an overall plan, I think that would be helpful to us. I don't know, Bob, if we could kind of meet in the middle there where
Yeah, no, listen,
may not necessarily need an engineered plan, but if we can see those GPS marked areas overlaid, say, on the plan that you've provided.
you know,
I
the
think
the controlled burn isn't a high concern, obviously. It's
Right.
how you manage it more than anything else.
Mhm.
The invasive species. Notice if you're doing all these singular, it would be, you know, knock yourself out on the controlled burn, knock yourself out on the invasive control. But it's a tree clearing, and then what relationship does it have to the resource? And so I think if we could, at a minimum, get all the trees that are going to be removed. Now, certainly, trees, once you do the delineation, anything that's outside of jurisdiction, you don't have to move. We're only concerned about, you know,
Mhm.
what's in our resource area that we have jurisdiction, and trying not to torture you more than we torture everybody else, Ben, but.
No, it's fine. I just want
Yeah.
to make sure I provide the commission what they need. So, I don't want to take up tons of more time, but on the submission that I gave Mason on the map that he had pulled up at the bottom. So there's really only tree removal that's outside of the forest cutting plan. So the forest cutting plan does have cutting that's around some of the resource areas, but that's already been approved. That's a different process. So the unit 1 and unit 2 on that map are non-native plantations. And so those two areas have trees that are in the buffer zone that we're requesting to remove. The rest of the cutting is, you know, is outside of that area. And so I'm happy to flag the salt marsh boundary there and count the trees if that's what the commission would like. And
Well, I think what we're saying in preparation for a site, we still want to do a site
Sure.
work, just for the obvious, Ben. I
Yep.
think at a minimum, if you can identify, if you can flag if you can do the delineation, and you can flag the trees that are going to be jurisdictional for us,
Sure.
I think that'd be a good starting point. And then at the conclusion of the site meeting, we can, you know, revisit this and decide what, if any, other steps are needed. whether a full site plan is required. Does that make sense, Mick?
No, I like that plan. Yeah, I think getting boots on the ground out there is essential to moving forward, and you know, I'm willing to make time to get out there to help expedite things.
Okay,
Yeah, unfortunately, I was out there today and yeah, it's walking access now from the parking lot. It's pretty rough. I don't think a truck will make it. So yeah.
next week, I think the weather next week is, we're gonna have 40-degree days. I
Yeah.
mean, we should be able to find something. So Ben, what I'm gonna suggest is, if you're in agreement, if you can do the delineation on the wetlands and the resource. What do you have, 100-foot resource there? Because you're salt marsh there, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, we're outside of Riverfront.
okay. And if you can identify, you know, where the buffers are, the delineation, and then mark the trees that within our jurisdiction, I think that would be a big help when we go out there.
Okay, I can get that done.
Okay, and it sounds like you can do that yourself too, right?
I can, yes.
Okay. Steve, we're trying to work with you, my friend. We're trying to
I appreciate it.
trying to create some overtime for you when your job.
We don't get overtime, but that's fine.
All right, let me do this. I'm gonna just go through the members one more time. Woody, you've heard the discussion. Would you like to add anything to that? Does that sound like a good first step?
Yes, it does. Yes. And getting out there to see it would be great too.
Okay, thank you, Woody. Frank, what are your thoughts that you've heard what we've discussed? Trying to find a compromise between what we typically do, and I think it's just overwhelmingly what you're doing. It's just not a typical submittal for us, as you can imagine, Ben. So we're probably being overly cautious.
Yeah, I'm fine with what you suggested, Bob.
Okay. And Mick, what are
Yeah,
your
good
thoughts?
with the plan going forward, site visit. Yep.
Okay. Mason, you want to add any comments on this or any concerns you may have?
No, nothing at this time.
Okay. All right, so Ben, you saw Mary's questions on that email.
Sure, I can work through those and respond to each one and return it to Mason if that's the best way.
Yeah,
or-
why don't you do that, and then she can provide that to Mary and actually send that out to the members.
Sounds good.
Okay, because it's been introduced. Actually, I'll put these in the Dropbox tonight, Mason. I saved these. Okay,
Alrighty.
then everyone will have them, then you can respond to them, Ben. And I think that'll expedite the process at the next meeting. Hopefully we can get the site visit done, sign off on the flagging and the delineation. Cover these questions with Mary and go from there.
Sounds
I don't
good.
know if this is worth bringing up or not, but I noticed in the proposal that you still have Doug Packer and his contact information as the conservation agent.
I mean, that's not Doug in the upper right-hand corner of my screen. You
Not really.
know, a younger, newer version. Yeah. No, you know what, Doug's been a fixture in the town for a long time and done a lot of good work for the town. But Mason is just excelling at all levels. Okay. All right, is there anyone from the public that has a comment at this time?
Seeing none.
Okay. All right, Ben, are you requesting a continuous this public hearing to our March 4th meeting?
I am. I enjoy meeting with you all every other week, so let's just keep it going. I appreciate the commission's time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I will entertain a motion to continue the public hearing to our March 4th meeting at the applicant's request.
So moved.
Is that Mick?
Yes.
Second, who's seconding?
Second,
Frank? Okay. Okay, roll call, all in favor? Woody,
Yes.
Mick,
Aye.
Frank,
Yes.
and Bob Connors. Thank you, Ben. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you all.
Okay. Diane, hello.
Sorry, I'll explain later.
No explanation, no explanation.
Sorry.
But, so we've covered, we've just covered the Kent Island project. It's being continued to the March 4th meeting. The Locken Road Dam project, what was approved with some minor conditions. And we had an RDA on Plum Bush that's being continued to March 4th as they update some information, little scope change, which starts to make it a little more challenging for an RDA, but I think they're going to figure it out. So the next order of business, if I didn't lose all my paperwork, is a public hearing for 80 Northern Boulevard. Is that correct, Mason?
That's correct.
Okay. So we have its DEP file number has not been assigned. We haven't had
Do you want it or not?
technical comments. So it's 80 Northern Boulevard. Applicant is submitting a notice of intent for demolishing and removing an existing single-family dwelling. The existing garage on site will remain untouched, and the construction of a new single-family home will follow the demolition process. Excuse me. Additional site improvements are outlined in the NOI. The project site is located or within a primary funnel zone. Okay, Mason, can you give us a quick overview on this?
Yeah, so existing property, vacant right now. I can share some photos. Um,
Oh, okay, I know this property.
Yeah, so these are the photos from the site visit. I believe the plan shows the removal of this middle section here, which I can show better.
That connects the double car garage to the house.
Correct. Yep.
This is probably the widest part of Plum Island. I think this house has more sand in front of it than anyone.
Yeah, so no other information I would say, but the only recommendation I would have is for them to clearly identify the limit of work line in the backyard area. I didn't see that on the original submission, so I think it'd be a good idea to show that.
Okay, is the applicant here or his representative that wants to make a presentation? Typically because it is, we don't have a file number, we don't have technical comments. The commission typically holds comments and questions until we get to that point. But the applicant has certainly, availed the opportunity to make a presentation.
Yeah, my name is Al Ward. I'm the owner and applicant. And because the DEP file number isn't here yet, I was figuring on having this continued, but maybe trying to schedule a site visit in the interim before the next meeting so you can familiarize yourself with the property, if that's possible.
Yeah, so Al, welcome. So typically, Al, you know what it is? We try to schedule a site walk. When we have the number, it's the technical comments. What's happened in the past is we've done a site visit, and a week later, DEP comes in with a number of issues or concerns that they want us to address that we didn't have available when we're doing the site walk, and it requires, another site walk. So what I would suggest is you're gonna need to continue it to the March 4th meeting. Typically, you should have a number by then. And I would say that if we get technical comments along with your file number, we would schedule a site visit, you know, when we've reached that milestone. And many of us live on the island, so it's not going to be. You could very well have a site visit 2 or 3 days after the March 4th meeting.
Okay,
It's
I mean,
just-
whatever works for you guys.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
fine
just
with.
the,
I
it's
just figure
just the
we,
process. It's just trying to be economize time and cost
Sure.
on all parties, and so.
yeah, that makes total sense. So, I mean, I'm good with that if that's, I mean, just
Okay.
continuing at this point is fine since we don't have a file number.
Okay. So you're requesting a continuance to the March 4th meeting?
Correct.
Okay. All right, I will entertain a motion to continue this public hearing to the March 4th meeting at the applicant's request.
So moved.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
just a point of order, please.
yes,
My name's Jeff Roloffs. I represent the abutters.
mhm.
I understand this discussion's going to be continued, but since we've been sitting through this and the hearing's been open, would you be patient enough to give me 3 minutes to just walk through a few photos and highlight my client's concerns so that you're mindful of those as you go out and start thinking about the project and viewing the site?
Yeah, just identify yourself, the property that you're representing, and give us your best presentation, and I'm gonna hold you to 3 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I'm gonna time you and see how good you are.
I'm not sure I'm going to make that. I'll try to do my best. Okay, so my name's Jeff Roloffs. I'm an attorney in Newburyport. I represent Tim and Anna Drost, who live directly next door at 76 Northern Boulevard. I just want to, Mason, if you could just allow me to share my screen quickly. I just want to run through a few photos, give you some photos of the summer view of the property. And again, just want to highlight the concerns that we have here. So that's just the introductory slide. I'll get to those photos. You mentioned that this property is in the widest part of the island. There is a significant dune between the house and the ocean, but it's in a very narrow strip of land, right? We've got the basin just behind it. So that's something to be mindful of. The dunes here are very important. This is the property here. And it's this dune between the Ward's house and my client's house here that we're most sensitive to and want to make sure is going to be appropriately protected. Here are the plans and a list of our main concerns here. Existing conditions here. My client's property is just to the south. You can see the hashed lines on the plan are the areas where the vegetation is proposed to be removed. And I've circled here these portions of the building existing on the left, proposed on the right. And our primary concern here is that the new building is going to be sort of relocated further towards and into and over that existing dune. So that's a concern of ours. We have been in discussions with the Wards and their council, and they've been very receptive to our concerns, and I think are contemplating potential revisions to address these, but discussions are ongoing. In the meantime, with respect to the original proposal that you see here, it's protecting that dune is the biggest concern that we have. They're increasing the size of the building. There's going to be a loss of 1,245 square feet of vegetation with no proposed mitigation planting or dune nourishment to make up for those impacts. No dune monitoring, which we would suggest. There's a notation that there's a fence to be removed, which is actually on my client's property, right in front of the dune. You'll see that in the photos. And as Mason mentioned, no limits of work are identified on the plans. I outlined the existing building. This is actually a screened porch. The building itself is in light blue. And I just slid it over to the proposed building just so you can see the overlap of the proposed over the existing. And again, it's this corner of the building. Primarily this corner of the building, I highlighted the 18-foot contour. You can see the proposed building puts a piling into that. The existing building is below the 17-foot line, That dune has matured significantly over the last decade or so, and it's a very important dune given the position that it's in. These are just some photographs, aerial photographs from my map. That's the property. This is the dune. You can see all the vegetation wrapping around the existing structure. Just zoomed into that. So again, this vegetation and this dune here would be impacted by the proposed building. Here's a photo just taken from the Google Street Views, but that shows how significant this dune is and how robust it is with the vegetation, not only the vegetation, but the shape and the height and how robust it is. This is the Drost property here, my client's property. This fence is the one I mentioned. And they've told me, by the way, that they don't plan to take that whole fence down. They're going to correct that notation on the plan. There might be a piece of it taken down, but protecting that dune with this fence, which is on my client, most of it of which is on my client's property, during construction and after construction is really important. It's kept people from walking on it, which is why it is the way it is. Just pictures, 2023 here. You can see the dune has improved a lot. And again, this is the primary dune that we're mostly concerned with. Back to 2012, you can see it was a lot more open. The vegetation was not as robust. So there's been progress here, and we don't want to lose that progress. So those are our primary concerns. We just ask you to keep those in mind as you're reviewing the project, and we do plan to continue working with the wards between now and the next meeting, and hopefully can develop a plan that we would come in and support. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. You've
Yeah.
just simply reaffirmed the need for a site visit, and we'll make sure that you're notified and your clients are notified when that becomes scheduled.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, and I think we'll see. Again, it's one of those things. What technical comments come in from DEP will be, will give us some guidance as well.
Right.
Okay, so we had a motion in a second to continue the public hearing to March 4th. So I'm going to do a roll call. Mason, is that correct? I'm just looking at my notes here. Why don't I do this? Let's just start over. I will entertain a motion at the owner's request to continue this public hearing to March 4th.
So moved.
So moved.
All right, and you're giving us the second, Frank?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, roll call, all in favor? Woody,
Yes.
excuse me, I'm trying to sneeze here. Mick,
Aye.
Diane,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes.
and Bob Connors. Okay, thank you, Al, thank you, Jeff, and we'll see you on the 4th.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, next thing, a general project discussion, National Grid 21-day notice regarding right-of-way herbicide applications. Mason, I think at the last meeting, what we had asked was, could you research to see if there had been a previous RDA issued on this?
Yeah, so
matter?
with this, from what I had heard, I had reached out to the person whose name was on the yearly notification. They let me know that the original permit was filed with the state, and then from there they just submit kind of those yearly updates to the town. Mary and I had done a little bit of review looking at the regulations, and I believe they are exempt.
Okay, well, then no further discussion is necessary.
And I believe that is 10.
We believe you.
CMR 310-1002H, I believe it is.
Okay. All right. Well, then I think that matter has been settled. All right. Words of wisdom. What words of wisdom do you want to offer? Any snow shoveling techniques, farming techniques that we, manure
Just stay
management that
warm.
we
Stay warm, everybody.
Mick, how about you? Any?
No, I just discovered this week I am just too old to shovel snow anymore. That's it.
Well, I'll be honest with you, when,
Or want to.
on Sunday morning, I get up and I keep a Bobcat in my yard, so I'm plowing up my driveway and I'm looking at all my neighbors in about a half-mile radius that have this heavy wet snow. 2 cigars and 5 hours later, I finished helping out all my neighborhood. So that's how the island rolls out here, Mick.
You're just a good Samaritan, Bob.
Well, thank God Kathy doesn't let me smoke cigars in the house, so.
Yeah, there you go, right.
It was not a total selfless act.
Yeah,
Frank,
right.
anything, Frank, you want to add? Any comments?
I'm just happy that the DPW gives residents salt and sand mix. My driveway was an ice rink. It's not paved, so it's gravel, so we weren't able to scrape it bare. And when it rained, it just turned to one big sheet of ice.
It has been like that everywhere, and even with pavement, once it rained, what little bit of snow that maybe you didn't remove, you just had black ice.
Right.
I mean, we had a guy coming to work today on his way in, he slipped on ice. Thank God it was before he was actually in work, and he was on property not owned by me.
I say, if you want an OSHA determination on that, Bob, I can help you out. That is considered commute. That is not considered work yet.
There you go. Diane, any words of wisdom you want to, are you back in your house? What's going on?
Yes, I am back in my house and I do apologize. I should have given you notification. It was an unexpected emergency. So I tuned in as soon as I could. So I'm sorry for my missing most of the meeting.
No. So
I should have
Mason,
notified you but I'll tell you later.
Diane, did you move in this weekend or was it?
Yes, we're here. We are here.
Enough said.
I'm back.
So Mason, just make a notation on the meeting notes.
Yep.
On the minutes that you had the 5 of us that started, Mary signed out, and then, so Diane, you came in just for 80 Northern, was that the only one you came in on?
Correct.
Okay. So when you do the vote on the continuance, you'll just have, Rima not present, O'Brien join the meeting, and then record the vote. And that at least makes sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to the rest of the world, but okay. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved. Yeah.
So it's Diane and Mick.
Yeah. Second.
Okay, all in favor? Woody, Mick,
Yeah.
Diane, Bob
Yes.
Connors, and Frank. And
Yes,
Frank.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Meeting is closed at 8:01.